You're watching Georgia Alert. My name is Becca, and today I'm with Tini and Marika. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
We will be talking about Georgian news, the latest events that have been unfolding in Georgia. This week, the highlight of the week is the United States sanctions Georgian Dream officials and enablers. Propaganda reacts. The U.S. Department of State spokesperson Matthew Miller announced that the U.S. has imposed travel bans on dozens of Georgian individuals on June 6th, and including their family members in the first tranche of sanctions. According to the Miller, the visa restrictions comprises of members of the Georgian Dream Party, members of parliament, law enforcement, and private citizens. Responsible for undermining democracy, violently attacking peaceful protesters, intimidating civil society representatives, and deliberately spreading disinformation. Miller also underlined that this is just the first step in the series of actions of the U.S. This has been the highlight of the week, and we will be discussing the U.S. sanctions of GD members and the parliament members. So let's begin discussing this event. What do you think the reaction of the ruling parties, and how will this situation unfold?
First of all, we might say that this is the first time in history that Georgian government is sanctioned by the USA, and they're not sanctioned for international politics, but domestic politics, and that is very important that in this regard we're sanctioned. USA didn't announce which of the parliament members will be sanctioned. I'm not sure even if they know who is sanctioned and who is not, because they haven't spoken about it yet. So as they said, when they are going to leave the country and when they are going to fly to the USA, that's when they will know who is sanctioned. We've had different opinions from the Georgian Dream members after the sanction thing was announced. Georgian Dream propagandist TV stations started talking about the USA and how they are trying to get us to Maidan, how the USA tries to get us to Maidan. As we know, this is the first step from the USA. Sanctions are going to continue. Probably at the end of October, it will get more and more intense. So we'll wait for what is going to happen.
It has been long spoken before. This subject of sanctions has been at the table for quite a while now, and they are finally here. They have begun this process. How do you think this will unfold, and how will the party react to this? Will they change their direction and change their policies, these foreign agents law?
Yes, thank you, Becca. Right now the United States is not imposing sanctions as a inherently punitive mechanism, from what I hear and see. It's giving them, the remaining ones, a chance to switch sides and leave the system before they're as well sanctioned. So if it were punitive, they would go all in and sanction everyone at the same time altogether. But now those who are not sanctioned, they have a chance to leave, and that is the main objective of these sanctions at this point. It's very important because many of the Georgian Dream enablers, they are not unconditional allies to the system. They are situational allies, and they are there with the government for the sake of benefits, including international benefits, all the luxuries and traveling and so on. So that is why I'm always saying that imposing sanctions and travel bans, especially on family members of GD enablers, is going to be much more efficient than in case of Iran or Belarus or other regimes, wherein some people sometimes they refer to it that sanctions don't work. I think in Georgia it will work, and it is very important to try to crack them before the October elections. And sanctions and travel bans is one of the key mechanisms to crack them. Maybe from the West side, it's probably the only mechanism actually to put pressure on the Georgian Dream. We want them to get disorientated and demobilized before the October election so that they are unable to rig it as they want to rig it. Because if that doesn't happen, nothing will stop them to go full Lukashenko in elections as well. So this is very important. And we already see them becoming quite hysterical publicly. Some of their propagandists, they are like lashing out at the United States, quoting Maradona, that they hate everything that comes out of the United States, and they also say that the United States sucks anyway, so let's just now move to China in terms of like values and culture, because China is the new cool thing. Yes.
They might not be fans of the US, but their children are certainly looking forward to studying US, to travel there. Recently, we've heard that the son of the prime minister is coming back to the country because he was planning to study and receive education in the United States, but he's no longer able to do that. And
as investigative journalists found out, he had on his face right now at his university. There is he's not studying right now because they have holidays. However, investigative journalists saw him in Tbilisi, and they saw already also a Facebook profile of his where he put that he already finished the university, even though he was going to continue until 2027, I think. So he already put on Facebook that he's no longer attending the school. And also, one of the narratives from the Georgian Dream is about upcoming elections of the USA also. And they tell their supporters and GD members that Biden is going to go, Trump is going to come, and the situation is going to change. So this is one hope for Georgian Dream, and they believe that this is
I think they're desperate. First of all, they're trying to sell it as that this does not affect them, that they do not wish to travel to US anyway. But at the same time, the Republican Party is not going to back them, because we've seen Trump's administration, what he's able to do, that he is one of the most strongest, he has the strongest personality against Russia, and he's certainly not going to side with the people who are associated with Russia. We've seen him last year go to Europe, in his last term go to Europe and strictly speak to the Europeans that they should be less and less dependent energy-wise with Russia. And at this time, I don't think that Trump is going to remove sanctions from the GD members. Also, this is just the first step. This is the first tranche, as Matthew Miller has announced, the travel bans. In case of Russia, they have enacted new laws, and within these new laws, there are public lists of people who are sanctioned. But with Georgia, they have not enacted new laws. They've just changed the policy of immigration law, and this information is protected. So they're not revealing the list of the people who have been sanctioned. But as time goes on, these sanctions might get harsher and harsher, and probably new laws could be enacted in relation to Georgia, to Georgian ruling party. So this is just a warning shot, so that they should be more on alert rather than just deny that this does not have any effect on them.
Well, yeah, there's Megabari Act in Congress, as well as the Georgian People's Act, and by the way, I don't think there are many instances at all of successive administrations removing sanctions from previously sanctioned individuals.
Yeah, I think it's lifetimes.
That doesn't really happen. Plus, the Senator Jean Shaheen wrote a tweet that she will make sure to make by law, by the legislation, these sanctions permanent. So I don't think. And Congressman Joe Wilson, the main author of the Megabari Act, is also a Trump supporter, from what I know. Yes, so. The Georgian Dream is, but yes, their narrative, one of their key narratives, is that America is far away anyway, that they're afraid of flying anyway and stuff like that, and that they still have Europe. So we hope that changes, definitely. And if I may add a little, so I hear that there's a lot of concerns in the European institutions not to sideline Hungary so that they have minimal differences and divisions within the European Union. However, I think it's extremely important for the European Union to realize that what's happening now in Georgia is not only about Georgia, and the same foreign agents law or other illiberal laws, they are going to spring up in other EU states and other enlargement states like the Western Balkans. For example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik, he suspended the precision of this law, same foreign agents law, until further notice. And I'm very sure that he's just observing what happens to the Georgian dream. If the Georgian dream is properly dealt with after this, then he will drop it. If not, if Georgian dream still manages to stay in power and win, basically, then he will proceed with this law. And it's also beginning, Serbia is also beginning to discuss this law. There are similar patterns in Slovakia and Hungary. So maybe sidelining Hungary is more important now than letting these laws spring up. So we need individual sanctions, also from individual EU states, if need be, and travel bans and also educational bans. So that would be great, because I just learned yesterday that it's not the same, because apparently if you're already enrolled in European institutions, travel bans might not apply to you, but educational bans will. So yeah.
Not only educational bans and travel bans, we've learned from experience that sanctions, they tend to add on, and it might spread to luxury items that they would like to purchase and import here, or any items, basically assets, they might be frozen, which they possess elsewhere. So these sanctions are sort of one of the last resorts for the international community to pressure on certain political actors who are undermining democracy. And these are just warning shots. They definitely do not want to escalate this furthermore. And the common thing, the reasonable thing here would be to change the policies, because also not only international communities against this, but the whole Georgia basically is protesting these events, this legislation for months now. So let's hope.
Let's hope, and let's hope that EU follows USA's decision on sanctions.
Exactly.
Other thing that happened this week, actually last week, I think we kind of discussed Georgian Charter very deeply. However, on that day, opposition parties signed the Georgian Charter, even though we expected that there would be 8 parties who would be signing. There have been 16 parties who have signed the Georgian Charter. This charter is a roadmap initiated by President Salome Zurabishvili for resolving the political crisis and advancing EU integration. So the Georgian Charter, announced by President Zurabishvili on May 25th, calls on all signatory parties to fulfill its EU-aligned reform objectives during the spring session of the newly elected parliament, and to schedule early elections for the fall of 2025. So what do you guys think about Georgian Charter, since it has been 1 week since political parties signed it?
The main point of the Georgian Charter is that we are preparing for a new election. Then it's a call for the opposition to unite against the recent events, that this Russian law has been signed, against the changing of the course of Georgia, that majority of people want to go to EU, join the EU, and would not want to associate our development with the North. So this is basically, this charter is a document on which the whole political spectrum unites with, and also this is a step to implement reforms, key reforms, which would on one hand repel the undemocratic laws and on the other hand enact the laws which gets us closer to EU. So this is a positive action from the president to de-escalate the situation. We've talked about this Georgian Charter in the previous show, but yes, this will be the theme of the politics of Georgia for quite some time now, and we hope that certain positive actions will follow up on this Georgian Charter, the signing of Georgian Charter in the coming weeks. Perhaps they will have even a specific plan for the elections. And let's see how the situation
That's what whole Georgia waits for now. They want some kind of unity around opposition parties, so that they know that if not GD, what they're planning to vote for. So, Marika, what do you think about this kind of unity in the whole opposition? And are there any news regarding that? Have any political parties announced any kind of unities? Because we know that elections are coming up, and there's not a lot of time left until elections.
Yes, so well, there's differences in opinion. Our parties, Girchi, More Freedom and DROA, are not at all against the big unity, to say the least. Yes, but there are other parties who openly express negative attitude towards it out of concerns, mostly about the UNM. Well, I personally think that we should keep an open mind, and maybe we should do like very tailored research with very targeted questions. Like, for example, just an example, would you agree with the big unity if the UNM fulfills this and that obligations and gives up this and that, for example? Because the UNM, yesterday, the new chairwoman, Tina Bakucheva, also said that they are open to everything and they don't have any preconditions for the big unity. So just for the sake of being sure in our decision, I think our sociology and sociological research should be very targeted, very tailored, and very in-depth. So we shouldn't base our decision on, oh, my friend doesn't like UNM and my grandmother hates Saakashvili and stuff like that. Because many things change, and this Russian law and the existential threat that we feel from this government has definitely changed a lot in the society, and brought together people who wouldn't think that they would ever be back together at the same table. Yes, so, and by the way, one of the other key issues that our Western partners can help us with and should help us with is election monitoring. So I understand that the key players are Georgians themselves. I'm not saying that the entire responsibility of what happens next in Georgia is on the West, definitely. But as for helping here people in Georgia, opposition parties addressed Congressman Joe Wilson, the initiator of the Megabari Act in the Congress, with a plea to commit necessary human and financial resources to ensure due election observation for the October parliamentary elections in Georgia, stressing that the stakes are high and our Euro-Atlantic future hangs in the balance at a historic crossroads. Yes, well, the Georgian Dream, they do not rig elections on the election day, and they already have the elections heavily manipulated months before elections, with the pressure, intimidation, vote buying, some carrots and sticks against population, and so on. There can be things like, if you don't vote for me, I will jail your father, or if you do vote for me, I will release your father who is in jail. And then they also require from people proof that they voted for the Georgian Dream, like even a photo proof from the voting station, polling station, and so on. Another issue, by the way, is the Georgians abroad voting. It's not the issue of this week that much, but I'll just mention quickly. However, this week also, the President Zurabishvili, she underlined that many Georgians abroad have been arbitrarily removed from the consular registry, so they are suddenly unable to vote, and that they should check themselves if they're still able to vote. And it's a big issue in general because they don't have an adequate amount of polling stations, and usually polling stations are hundreds of kilometers away, and it's impossible to cover those distances for working people in just one day. We have just one-day elections in Georgia, and many different problems with the Georgian voters abroad, but we call on the president and the opposition parties call on the Georgian diaspora to be very active, and diaspora themselves, they are themselves very active and reaching out to organize better inclusion in elections. So yes, it is extremely important to have the elections under the magnifying glasses from yesterday on, and if the Georgian dream is not cracked before elections, and if they do rig the elections, it's extremely important that it's not legitimized for them, even out of good consideration for the people of Georgia, that, for example, if elections are not considered legitimate, then Georgia cannot proceed on the European integration as fast. Still, like, it would do Georgia a great job if, in case elections are rigged, it's not legitimized for them. Yeah.
I'm going to add one more thing. Because Salome Zurabishvili mentioned it, she said that we have the chance of 1.5 million people who can come and vote. This includes diaspora and youth. And we know that from 2020 elections, 4 years have passed, and there are lots of young people who have not voted yet. So we, political parties and everyone who is active in this political situation, they need to urge youth to come to the elections. So even though Georgian government is going to rig the elections, turnout, if it's quite high, it will be difficult for them to rig the elections. So we need to talk to our diaspora and youth and urge them to go to elections, and we can do everything to help them. We know that diaspora can't go to vote. For some of them it's very difficult because they don't have polling stations in their cities. So, for example, if they're in Texas and they want to vote, they either have to go to California or they either have to go to New York, and it's quite difficult for them. Probably activists will also organize some kind of fundraising thing where we can help them to manage to go to other states to go to vote.
Secondly, there are many variables that need to be taken into consideration when it comes down to the voting, and the votes of the people who live abroad are very important to Georgia at the moment, because those are the people who the ruling party cannot intimidate. They can be removed from the process altogether by rejecting them their right to vote, but they cannot be intimidated, and they're certainly for change, because they might be willing to come back to their country to live their life here, but at the moment it is impossible for them. So second, I want to mention this Megoberry Act, that this could be the support that we need from the international community at the moment to give further incentive to the Georgian people to vote, to decide, to this is a referendum where the country wants to associate its future with. In this passing of Megoberry Act, Georgia gets closer relations with the United States, the free trade, the without visa traveling without visa, and many benefits that the Georgians, the common people, would be able to get in case this Megoberry Act is signed. So this would be great if this act is signed in time for the mobilization of Georgian electors, so that they understand who is our friend, who do they want to associate themselves, who do they want to basically relate themselves to in the future. I don't know, if I had a choice between US and Russia, I would certainly travel to US rather than go to, I don't know, Chelyabinsk. So this would give further incentive to Georgians at this moment to mobilize and to decide that my vote counts, and now it is the time to decide the future of this nation. Also, you mentioned the new generation. They have recently become new voters of Georgia, and their vote counts as well. A lot of new voters will be voting, and they are the ones who should be deciding their own future as well. So there are many variables that need to be taken into consideration, and we definitely need, of course, the help of the international community with monitoring of the elections. That will be crucial to Georgian democracy, that the GD does not steal all of this process and rig all of this election. But I certainly think even if they try to rig the elections, the margin would be so low if we mobilize enough people and go vote on the voting day. It won't matter, it won't make that much of a difference, and the will of the people will be the deciding factor. So it comes down to faith and action. Faith that we are the deciders and that we need to act and vote. Another news that has been hot this week is the Russian law has been enacted as the Speaker of the Parliament, Shalva Papuashvili, signed into the bill on June 3rd, after the President refused to do so. In 60 days from June 4th, the key provisions of the law will take effect. Over 100 Georgian CSOs have vowed not to register in the defamatory registry. So the non-governmental organizations have promised to not comply with the registry of this law. The ruling party says that they will be fined regardless if they choose to not obey this procedure. But obeying this procedure means that they announce themselves as agents, foreign agents. So this law basically is a form of censorship to call other people agents if they are funded from abroad. If the funds are more than 20%, they are automatically set as the foreign agents. So over 100 Georgian SEOs are rejecting this. How do you think the CSOs will act in the face of the Georgian threat that they will be sanctioned? They will be fined. The fine is up to 25,000 lari, so it's not a small fine as well.
There's a lot. The fines are definitely punitive. It's not some regulatory fine or something. The amounts are very high for Georgia. So this law, there was a different information initially. The Papuashvili said that it would be enacted from the next day. Now we hear that it will be enacted in 60 days, so like early August. And then they will have a time for registration, well, by law. It's actually like I can't really answer or how the CSOs will be averting the registration, but let's see, because it will get hot right before elections. So September and October will be those months probably. September probably. That is about registration and fining, and maybe then like freezing accounts of NGOs. So I don't know. Let's see. As for the maybe loopholes of how to avoid it, like I don't necessarily know, but also I'm not sure if it's to be disclosed right now. Yes. in case there is a loophole, but definitely we will try to do so. And it's actually the EU ambassador to Georgia, Pavel Herchinsky. He indicated that the funding that the Georgian government gets from the European Union, it might be redirected to the civil society of Georgia. So there is a will from our Western partners to aid Georgian CSOs.
So it will be before the August, probably, yeah.
Actually, unsure. So I have a question: that does it mean that the Georgian NGOs will be like essentially required to register so that they receive more funding, or actually I don't know how that's proceeding, but I don't think that there's anyone who can like answer that right now with confidence.
When they get the funding, probably it will be frozen, as they said. So for now, as I know, CSOs are saying that for now, before the elections, they can fund them. They have some kind of funding that will go till elections, so they can observe the elections.
But they will need to register under the name of foreign.
Sure. One loophole that is apparent from the legislation is there is a 20% margin. So maybe if they are funded less than 20%, that would solve the problem, and maybe they fund each other. Certain organizations, Georgian-based organizations, they fund each other. That could solve. But regardless, this is not an actual legal debate, because the heart of this legislation is arbitrary. They do not care about justice. They decide. The Ministry of Justice is solely in charge of overseeing this legislation, and they have removed the court system from this legislation. The Ministry of Justice can decide to deem any CSO as the foreign agents law under the suspicion that they are being funded by the foreign actors. So not only they do not require any proof, the suspicion is enough. So, and this is clearly directed against the dissenting voice, against like media and people who have internet domains who are spreading information. So they are clear about in the legislation that this is not about certain projects that the government opposes or something like this. They are using this against critical media, against dissenting opinion. So,
if I may add, just like it's really a joke, because under this law, although Becca is right, it's completely arbitrary, but still, like if we go by definitions, an animal shelter, and in Georgia there's no local money, there's no local funding for CSOs, because like everyone is afraid of government intimidation. So that's why we rely heavily on Western money. And an animal shelter that receives funding from an anonymous source abroad, which amounts to more than 20% of their funding, is a foreign agent. So that's like, you don't know where your money is coming from. It's an anonymous donation from abroad. You're an animal shelter, but you're a foreign agent. And foreign agent in Georgian language means a spy. And how the government propaganda uses it is a traitor of the nation and an enemy. So I would love to see those.
Probably they're preparing dogs for the Maidan.
Exactly, like dogs. Especially that Georgian protest dogs have been so famous. They might actually be afraid of dogs at this point. Yes.
It's funny that they are basing this document based on transparency, but transparency is a principle of the government. So they do not necessarily declare their own finances.
They're hiding.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, the government hides their spending, and
but they're using this against the other non-governmental organizations that we want to know where does your money come from, as if they don't already know this.
They do, and one good thing that the Ombudsman of Georgia did is that he issued a statement that transparency is already there, and this law is not necessary in terms of transparency. So it really helps me with the Russian bots and others on the internet that here, even the Ombudsman of Georgia.
One key detail about this law is that they mention that the purpose of this law is not to remove them from broadcasting, or not to they're allowed to continue their broadcasting, these channels, these CSOs, but the Ministry of Justice has the power to start an investigative process, to acquire any information, any working secret or anything within this organization. So this, on one hand, they say that we do not want to stop their working process, but on the other hand, they can just start an investigation and just stop their working flow, basically. So
we've seen how it happened in Russia. even though in Georgia everything is going more quickly, because in Russia it was 2012 when they adopted the law, and by 2020 all the opposition parties and CSOs have left the country. So it took them 8 years. But in Georgia, everything is happening so fast that we don't know how fast these things are going to continue.
Yeah,
so
certainly it will come to the stopping of their operation, and this does not stop at just registry.
Yeah, and I'm sure the Kremlin, well, I'm personally sure the Kremlin is pressing hard. And it's not the only Russian-style and Russian-inspired law. There's several package of laws that currently in the hands of the Georgian Dream can be used to make Georgia some sort of mini Russia. For example, the offshores law that they also adopted right now, the presidential veto was overridden on the next day from the Russian law, so May 29th. And then it was signed into law also in early June by the Speaker of the Parliament. This means that all assets brought to Georgia from offshores are freed from taxes and duties. So in general, in the hands of a different government, like a Girchi style libertarian government, for example, it could have been used for the benefit of the country, definitely. And Drua also, Drua's the Drawing Girchi Alliance. But in the hands of the Georgian Dream, we are very much worried that it will be used as a mechanism to make Georgia a safe haven for Russian oligarchic money and beyond, because nobody will be checking the backgrounds of the offshores, and quite the opposite. The worse the background, the better, because, I don't know, Bidzina release Russian friends and others can make now money in Georgia and be safe from the Western sanctions, more or less in Georgia. And I hear from Russian press that one of the reasons why Russia cannot afford to lose Georgia right now is exactly that Georgia is being used for sanctions evasion and illicit Russian money, so that they cannot afford to lose a platform that gives them some comfort in this situation. So that's it. And then there's also Tini could go on with the anti-LGBT legislation.
Yeah,
that comes
before we move on to that,
yeah, sure.
And under normal circumstances, this offshore law could have been used to the benefit of the country, for sure. But the important aspect of this is the timing. When did they enact this law? As soon as they've heard that they were going to be sanctioned,
exactly.
that the West will sanction them, they started to remove the assets from the EU and West and bring it here, so they don't want to pay the taxes. And this is the reasoning behind this offshore law. So they are preparing themselves for the sanctions to protect their assets from the West. So that's the whole point. I agree with you that the libertarian view, in the libertarian politics, this could be used as a tool for the foreign money, that this could give them any further incentive to bring it here.
But everything has a context. So in this
the
context,
timing is
And another thing is anti-LGBT laws that Georgian government is going to register. We all know that Georgian government talks to their supporters from the perspective of Christian family guy who cares about its own citizens and Christianity and our traditions and values, even though Christianity does not get us to that kind of values. Speaker Papuashvili announced that Georgian Dream is registering their homophobic package of laws on the protection of family values and minors. So according to him, the legislative package includes wide-ranging bans of the LGBT community, including alternative forms of marriage, adoption of a child, even though we know that it's not still
it has not been an issue, yes.
Gatherings and demonstrations, gender reassignment surgery, and the dissemination of the broadcast of such information that is aimed to promote belonging to the opposite sex. Same-sex relations or incests. So one of the important things was here is that they're going to blur in the movies the scenes where they see same-sex people kissing or anything like that. We know that we have one Georgian movie where this kind of thing is happening, so probably they're gonna blur this movie as well and they're gonna ban it. We don't know yet, but yeah, it's still the narrative of talking to their supporters, what kind of things they're protecting. They're protecting their Georgian values and traditions from LGBT community, even though LGBT community themselves need to be protected from this right-wing people. Do we call it right? Extremely radicals who want to have an attack on LGBT community whenever they have demonstrations.
I think this is all about censorship. When we discuss the laws, we have to take into consideration what does this law solve. What is the problem that these laws solve? The offshores law, the Russian law, this anti-LGBT law, what are the problems that they solve in our society, basically? We cannot find any problems because these laws basically create problems for the country. Right now, we do not see any gay marriages in Georgia. We do not see any spies in Georgia, especially Western spies. And all of these laws are basically propaganda tools for the regime to silence dissent, to use their own propaganda narrative that they are these heroes protecting the national values. But Georgian families actually need better jobs, they need good economy, they need better connections with the Western world so that we can travel visa-free with EU, so we can trade with them, so we can have alliances with United States. And all of these laws, they put us further from those events and those parties. And that's the problem. So these laws, they do not solve or protect or help anyone. And that's the point that the Georgian ruling party is making, that somehow by enacting these laws they will protect Georgian nation.
And that's how Russian propaganda works.
Exactly.
We know that this kind of propaganda worked in lots of post-Soviet countries, and especially in post-Soviet countries because we have that kind of memory line of Soviet culture. So Georgian people, like maybe not majority of people, but maybe like 10 to 15%, they really are scared of these things that Georgian government says. So propaganda does not really do all the lies. They have a base on some kind of truth that people are scared of, and then they build this whole machine of propaganda. So that's how Georgian Dream works.
Yeah, if I may also add, so I'm sure that we will win this existential struggle, and it's not just about the government. It will be, how to say, when we win these elections and in general the struggle, it will be a mental revolution, because I'm sure that all Russian influences will like suddenly disappear, like Arya Stark killed the Night King, you know, in the Game of Thrones, and everything disappeared, because this is the last government that they can rely on. There is no further social, cultural, political capital for Russians here. Even these guys, they were never elected as pro-Russians, and it's just the bad electoral laws, all the money they have that help them, and so on. So it's the end for Russia in Georgia, and when there is no top-down governmental propaganda feeding the Russian propaganda in Georgia, then it will be very hard for them. And also the church will probably undergo through serious cleansing after they don't have any government backing anymore, in terms of like many in the church are unfortunately spreading Russian propaganda. But what I want to say is that like so usually we would be compared to Hungary. I think right now we are past Hungary and somewhere between Hungary and Lukashenko. But like if we, God forbid, lose elections and like lose altogether, then it will be some sort of a mix of Lukashenko and Kadyrov, Ramzan Kadyrov. It won't just be Lukashenko, because like with all the traditionally liberal things they're pushing the Georgian dream, it will be like very hard for Georgia, not just for the LGBT people, but even for women, because like they have already like began talking about restricting abortions rights, and Mamukam Dinaradze, the Georgian Dream member of the parliament, who is the initiator of this law, now this Russian law or something, he openly questioned whether single mothers should be able to have children, and whether the concept of single motherhood is okay. It was at the beginning of the Russian law, I guess. And then he apologized, sort of, said that, no, that's not what I meant. But nevertheless, attacks on women's rights will also continue, and there will definitely be an increasing stigma on women being single mothers and so on. Yeah.
The ruling party is trying to ideologize this battle, but this is not about ideologies. This is about existence. Yes. Right now, Georgian people are against an existential threat, and nobody really cares about what Mamukam Dinaradze thinks about marriage or any subject, because this is not the important factor at the moment. They have gone against the will, against the constitution, against the whole legal frame. They have removed themselves from that, and they have become criminals. We see how they are protecting the youth and how they are protecting the Georgian people on the streets. Every day there is a new case of somebody being beaten up because they have a dissenting opinion. Students, also these members of the parliament, they wear these masks of civility. They are the professors, the law professors who teach constitution, and the students, their own students, are protesting against them. We see this every day. Children just film this process, that they voice their opinions against these parliament members, and they are being beaten up right next door in the public on the grounds of the universities. So
this one was very. It was very difficult for me to hear. Even though we've heard lots of this kind of cases that people were beaten up, this was like during the day, in the morning, when our prime minister was giving the lecture on constitutional law. His titushkis, his people, were outside of the state university, and they were beating up one of the students who is actively opposing Russian law. So it was very difficult for me to hear that even during the day these kind of things happen. And we just heard that 1 hour ago, the leader of Zurab, Girchi Japaridze, at his home there were almost like 20 men standing, probably waiting for him to beat him up. They were all muscled with muscles and with masks, and they were going to have an attack. However, Zurab has not arrived at home yet, and I think they have left because it was already on TV.
We're not even surprised at this point that these things are happening.
If I may add, first of all, about LGBT, you are right that they're trying to make this a question of ideology, and they really tried hard to put the foreign agents law and the LGBT issue together to gain support, to gain public support against in support of the foreign agents law, because in Georgia, more or less, the society is conservative. I believe that it's definitely much more liberal than when we were children, like 20, 15 years ago, but it's still a divisive issue, let's say. So I hear that in many conservative communities, in churches, they preach that people should support the foreign agents law because it protects Georgia from LGBT infiltration. So they're still trying on the grassroots level to put the two together. As for the attacks, yes, well, this student Niko Managadze, there were terrible footages of it and lots of blood that he lost. and fortunately somebody filmed it, and the attackers are filmed. However, the police will not react on it, of course. And Zura Girchi Japaridze, the leader of Girchi More Freedom. I have lost count how many times he's been targeted at this point, and our friends and partners should know that Zura is extremely popular among the youth, and he's probably top there. I don't know, like really one of the top politicians for young people. So it's very much in the Georgian Dream's interest to remove Zura from the scene right now, and I would like our partners to be alerted and to keep an eye on Zura, because maybe they will also try to detain him or something.
Yeah. And it kind of looks like that they have some kind of list of people that need to be checked, that he's beaten up.
They admitted that Khareba, the head of the special forces, he admitted that he has a list through which he beats up people. So of course they have a list.
So we think that this violent attacks and physical assaults are going to continue until the election, and probably it's going to get more and more tense, and probably where the whole opposition and CSOs are ready for any kind of scenario. So even we're waiting for detainees and arrestments around opposition members. So we all know how the situation is very intense, and we're all prepared of it. Other than physical assaults, we also had the case that Georgian Dream banned some of the TV journalists from entering the parliament or just filming in the parliament. Since June 3, the parliament banned a third journalist, Natalia Kajaya. We had two other cases before. Natalia Kajaya from the opposition-leaning TV, Teve Pirveli, from working in the legislative building for 1 month. So she's not allowed to go in there for 1 month. The latest ban was made at the request of the leader of GD's split of People's Power Party, which is considered to be very conservative party who is anti-LGBT community, and MP Sozar Subari. So she was removed at the request of Sozar Subari. Kajaya's accreditation was also suspended because she continued to record the interview despite the MP's refusal. And few days prior, two other journalists from another opposition leaning media outlets, Mtavari TV and Formula TV, they were also temporarily banned from working at the parliament. So on June 6th, the Georgian Charter of Journalist Ethics issued a statement saying that the parliament continues to use the amendments adopted last year to the rules of conduct media and the legislature of punitive tool against critical media. So last year we saw the legislation that Georgian adopted that if any of MPs are bothered by journalists, they can let them go and not let them in the building anymore. So this is how this thing continues, and it's also a very good example of how Georgian Dream is trying to work against free media and free speech.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to it.
At this point, this is no surprise that we've seen how the parliamentary debates are going. Even during the inaction of this Russian law, they have removed opposition party members from the process, and the further they go down this road, the more damage they do to themselves, I think. We already know where they stand and what their methods are. So yes, this is no surprise at this point. We can move on to international relations. On June 4th, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution reiterating the right of return of all displaced persons and refugees to Georgia's Abkhazia and Tskhinvali region, South Ossetia, by a vote of 103 in favor, 9 against, and 52 abstentions. The number of votes in favor of the resolution increased from 100 to 103 countries compared to last year. So let's discuss the role of China and Iran, who abstained from voting despite Georgia's latest strategic partnership with China. Also, Georgian Prime Minister showed up at the Iranian president's funeral, but these events did not help gain their favor in all this process.
So, okay, yes, the GD signed a strategic partnership with China last year, and they're increasingly friendly with Iran as well. There are Georgians who say that China is a big market and it's a global player and we should have close relations with China. Well, definitely I'm not against relations with China, but in the world when it's increasingly values-based and all our friends and partners, they are finally realizing that Russia is the bad guy here and consolidating the European democracies. I think this is not the time to turn our faces to the other side. Especially that, as we see, we are not gaining much in return. So the Georgia-China relations, the strategic partnership, right now seems extremely uneven. So Georgia essentially handed over the very strategic Anaklia deep sea port to China. Right next day that the Russian law was adopted, and then China did not even support the right of the Georgian refugees and IDPs to return to the occupied territories. We all know how China operates in the international scene and how they capitalize on the economic and infrastructure projects to gain control in countries. Especially that Anaklia deep sea port is Georgia's gateway to the west, basically, and one of the key aspects of the middle corridor in general. So it's extremely important that it's not in the hands of anyone who is remotely allied with Russia, especially that it's very near the Russian-occupied Abkhazia, and we need this eastern Black Sea coast secured by the Western security umbrella and Western security architecture. It's important for the Black Sea security for the West as well as existential for Georgia, because if there's the West in Anaklia, then we have then the Eastern Black Sea is denied to Russia. But if it's not the West in Anaklia, then the vacuum, as we see, is filled by China, which is in this situation definitely not opposed to Russia, to say the least. So what we have now is that the Chinese will be controlling Anaklia and Russia will be constructing a Black Sea naval base in Abkhazia, 36 kilometers away from Anaklia. So we see that the entire Black Sea is now under these autocratic hands. And we could have prevented it, but of course the Georgian dream does not want to prevent it. They feel like a fish in the water in the autocratic global world order. So yes, and then, by the way, the Prime Minister Kobakhidze, he thanked China for upholding the similar position as before. So basically he thanked China for not voting against and just abstaining. I think his standards are quite low, and I hope he has better standards in his life in different spheres. Although being a puppet to oligarch, I don't know, I cannot. Anyway, if I may add just one last thing, the Speaker of the Parliament, Shalwa Papuashvili, he said that in this case, for us, abstention is equal to support. And the comedian Misham Shuldata, he had a really good episode on it. So, they could have said it to the members of the parliament about the Russian law. In this case, abstention is the same as support, and then they wouldn't even have sanctions or anything, So it's it's a new logic from the Georgian dream.
Yeah, and the other thing that is happening with this is propaganda. And we all know that Georgian Dream is doing well with propaganda, and we know that whatever they say, it's literally copied from Russia. So the first thing that happened here in this week is that People's Power, one of the Georgian Dream's small minor party, an offshoot of the ruling Georgian Dream party, issued a lengthy statement. And they were claiming that NATO's Article 5 does not guarantee military assistance to its allies in the event of an attack, and that the Georgian language translation of this Article 5 is falsified. So Georgian translators didn't do good with the translation, and they left out the part that gives individual members of the alliance the agency to decide whether or not to use the military assistance as they deem necessary, as well as criticizing the June 4 U.S. Congress hearing on Georgia. And the other thing was foreign minister in this case remained silent. They haven't made any statements regarding NATO's credibility. Also, in an interview with Russia state-controlled TASS news agency,
yes.
And Russia's deputy foreign minister said that the Moscow does not rule out that the West's goal is to try to implement the Maidan scenario in Georgia, and that some of the countries, Lithuania, Estonia, and Iceland, who were one of the first to express their solidarity with Georgian people, that they're interfering in Georgian politics and the internal affairs of an independent state. So,
at least one notable good event happened during this process, that Armenia voted in favor of Georgia for the first time.
And we had Marika in Armenia,
yeah,
so
our neighbor. So we are grateful for their vote. Yes, China. Their inaction is viewed as positive action from our GT ruling party members, but yes.
Yeah, if I may add, so the Armenia voted for the first time in favor, and in general we are having big geopolitical shifts in this region. Armenia is so unlucky that finally they are liberating themselves from this Russian yoke and going west, but they have Georgian dream in Georgia, who prevents them from proceeding to western direction with even bigger speed, because Georgia is the only land connection to Europe, basically because the border with Turkey is close. Georgia is completely going different direction, and yes, I was in Yerevan lately, and the mood there is that definitely they support protests very much, and they are hoping that we survive this and we win, because in December, when we got the candidate status, Armenians were very happy that Georgia would soon be in the EU, and then Armenia would follow very fast. But now it's how the tables have turned, because it's unbelievable. For the entire 2000s and even more, Georgia was the role model in the region, and the Armenians would in a good way look up to Georgia because of the reforms that we were undergoing. And now it's Georgians who look up to Armenia in many ways, because they're progressing much faster than we are. And yes, well, I got lots of positive feedback, and they are very much rooting and supporting. But I didn't hear anyone from the government of Georgia thanking Armenia for their position, unlike China, who just abstained. Anyway, yes, and the NATO, if I may add, NATO propaganda definitely. So a few years ago, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, former chairman of NATO, he suggested that Georgia should pursue the policy of trying to join NATO without Article 5 covering the occupied territories for now, and so that the rest of the territory of Georgia would be protected and Russia wouldn't be able to invade the rest of Georgia. And once the territorial occupation would be solved, then NATO Article 5 would also cover Abkhazia and Tskhin Valley region, South Ossetia. But the Georgian Dream did not pick up on it, and they even made it look like it was a plan to separate Abkhazia and South Ossetia from Georgia. while in reality they left the remaining Georgia, Tbilisi and everything vulnerable. So it wasn't really a big issue, but the fact that they didn't even try to pursue security for the territories that we control, it's, I think, very indicative. And just last several years, they have not been mentioning NATO even. And quite even moreover, at the Bratislava Globsec summit, I think it was October 2022, when then Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili said that NATO expansion is the reason why there's war in Ukraine. So
yeah, that is one of the narratives of Russian propaganda, that we don't need to join the NATO, because when you join the NATO, war starts. Even though we know that countries that have not joined the NATO yet, they are the ones who are targeted by by Russia, and that's why we need to go to NATO as soon as possible, so that we have the biggest threat, that is Russia.
There was one tweet when full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, and ever since then I'm searching for the author. He wrote that NATO enlargement is apparently not the reason why wars begin. It's the lack of it. It's the lack of NATO enlargement. Yeah. And
we've seen 2008 Bucharest summit, and we've seen the consequences of this summit. After this summit, two wars happened. One started in 2014 in Ukraine, and then now.
And Georgia.
And Georgia is ongoing.
Yeah. Testing morale. Yeah.
So the last news that we have for today is Schengen visa, which is very worrying for me, and it's very sad. But EU ambassador to Georgia said that EU will consider all options that can be introduced over Georgia due to adopting the Russian law, including the suspension of visa liberalization. So Georgian Dream, they have this narrative that they are the ones who brought visa liberalization to Georgian people, and now they are the ones who are losing it. Probably it will be a very cracking moment for other Georgian people who are now in favor of Georgian Dream, because all the people in Georgia use this Schengen visa, and we were very happy when we got it, because it was a new way, a new road for us to Europe, to get close to Europe. And now it's very sad that we might see losing this Schengen visa. But if this will crack Georgian people who are in favor of Georgian Dream, then this needs to be happen, of course.
They are mentioning the suspension. Maybe they will use this as a temporary suspension and not a long-term effect, to see, to put further pressure on the regime. I think this could create further incentive for the Georgian people, but at the same time, I'm more leaning towards the Megabari Act, which is offered by the Senator Joe Wilson, that in case that the US gives us positive options, to positive incentives for the Georgian voters to mobilize and decide their own future, if they want to go to the United States, and we see that majority of people are traveling in the United States with various means, sometimes not legal means, and this is connected with a lot of stress, a lot of finances. This act could remove a lot of pain and suffering from these people, and this could free up the people to travel, to trade, to use the benefits that the United States has for our country. This type of incentive would certainly be a good factor for the elections. That's where my hopes lie, and I think that's the help that we need from the international community, to give us options for the Georgians to see who is our Megabari, who is our friend and who is a foe. And I also think that we need to do everything possible to mobilize the society and to decide our own faith. But at the same time, some nudge in the right direction would be great from the West. And maybe the EU could take an example from the United States, and they could use sanctions against specific people who are a threat to democracy in Georgia and follow the way of the United States, as we have seen in the experience of Russian sanctioned people, and that is the desired outcome for us Georgians at this moment.
Definitely. If I may add, so Georgian Dream propaganda says that it's impossible technically to suspend visa liberalization for Georgia, but it's not impossible. It needs a qualified majority decision. It doesn't need a full majority. So in this case, Hungary cannot block the decision if the decision is made by most other countries. It can be done temporarily. I can't recall if it has been like permanently revoked for any country, but temporarily, I know that Albania has gone through that. And the Vanuatu, I guess, but Albania for sure. So now the EU ambassador also confirms that it needs qualified majority, and the Georgian Dream propaganda is like not correct in that. For Georgians, it's extremely important, and one of the key achievements probably in the independence of Georgia, that we have a visa-free to European states. So it's a really big issue. I myself would not advocate for this measure to be taken immediately. Like, I think sanctions on targeted individuals should go first. And the travel bans, but it should be clearly communicated to Georgian people that this is extremely, very much a possibility, and that if we do not, change government in Georgia, then we will definitely, be losing the visa-free to Europe. And in general, Becca, you're very right that we need sticks to the government and carrots to the people, and the Megabari Act's implications of making visas easier for Georgians. It's really important. The people should see that the West stands with us, the people, and the only impediment to further Western integration is the Georgian Dream. Yes.
So I think we're all finished with Georgian news, but since we started with EU, maybe we need to mention yesterday's elections. We were observing the elections from TV because Georgia is not part of EU yet. Probably in 2030 will be the next elections of EU will be in 2029. So when we're in EU in 2030, maybe new EU elections will be even better for Georgians. So for now, as we know, lots of things have not really changed regarding political blocs and groups. For example, EPP, European People's Party, they continue to hold 180 seats. For now, we know that by the 12 o'clock, the last counting, EPP has 185 members. We're very interested in Renew Europe because they're liberals of EU. From Georgia, some parties are part of ALDE group, which is part of Renew Europe, Strategia Belli Republicans, and Girchi More Freedom, and now Drua also applied for ALDE party, and we're waiting for the response for them to get us in. So lots of Georgian parties are part of this group. So for us it's very important because they're the ones who are lobbying Georgian interests on European level. And when we go to ALDE congresses and ALDE meetings, we Georgian opposition members tell our European friends what are our interests and our priorities, and they try to lobby as much as they can. Unfortunately, we lost 20 seats in EU this year. Probably it's because of the migration politics, also because of Macron's, because recently we saw that Macron, he was more popular last year than he is right now. And France was really shocking for me because in France, Liberal Party, which is Macron's party, received 15%, and the other party, Marine Le Pen's party, who is known to be Putin's not friend, but she has pro-Russian narratives. She remains 30%. So this is one of the key takeaways from yesterday's elections. I also want to mention that from Renew Europe, from liberals, some of the liberals, they know that they have lost this year because they expected more. And for example, Belgium's prime minister, who is part of ALDE party, and his party is liberal, he took the responsibility and he resigned from his job yesterday after the election results were known. So that's what is happening around Europe for now.
For Georgia and for Ukraine, as I understand, these changes are better for the pro-Ukrainian people. The representatives have been, the numbers have been increased. Also, this is good for Georgia, and I don't think that GD members are happy about all of this.
Yes, it was really funny because yesterday when I don't know, actually I haven't been able to follow that much, but apparently there was this big expectation that far-right parties would gain much more than they actually did. So the GD propagandists, they were celebrating on Facebook that the America's doormat LGBT Europe was defeated and real Europe was now being reborn. And I would like to hear them commenting on the last results that came in.
Yeah, even though Europe is becoming more conservative than liberal, they're quite more conservative now. European people's choice of standing by Ukraine, it's not ending. They still continue to stand with Ukraine, and whenever you go to Europe, you see that there are lots of Ukrainian flags around. So it's in people's minds that they want to stand with Ukraine and they want to stand against Russia. So I don't think that it's quite possible in near 4 or 5 years in EU that there might be more people against Ukraine and against help.
Yes,
for
definitely.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think that's all for this week. It's been a busy week, and let's see how the situation unfolds in Georgia, in neighboring countries, in EU, in US. And thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank
we'll
you
see
very
you next
much.
week.
See you next week.
See you next week.